Hello and welcome to Number by Color. I'm Todd, and today I am excited to talk about a modern game that could have been a game from my childhood, The Messenger. I grew up with the NES and SNES in the early 90s, and those are the two consoles that really cemented my love of gaming. Many of my favorite games are still among those 8 and 16-bit experiences. And it just so happens that The Messenger takes many cues from games on both those platforms, brings them into the modern times, and crafts something wholly unique in the process. I've been trying to think of a better way of describing this game than what you'll probably hear many other people say, but when it comes down to it, this game is basically Ninja Gaiden meets Metroid. And it's awesome. The Messenger was first released on PC and Nintendo Switch in 2018, and even though publisher Devolver Digital didn't bring the game to PlayStation 4 and Xbox One until 2019 and 2020, respectively, Sabotage Studios' first game was well worth the wait. I originally bought the game on the Switch because I was so excited for it, but I ultimately waited to play the PlayStation 4 version because, trophies. Either way, I'm happy to have played it, so let's break it down. Right when you boot up the game, you're greeted with backstory told through a handful of still images and white text. If you have any nostalgia for the NES era, this will be a very familiar sight. The basic premise is simple. The last survivors of the human race have banded together to train and protect themselves from the demons whose re-emergence has been foretold in legends. Our protagonist is given the task of delivering and protecting a sacred scroll, thus he becomes the messenger. Just like in the old days, most of the story happens in this initial setup. As you play through the game, you'll get bits and pieces of a narrative here and there, but there's nothing substantial for quite a while. In fact, it's not until near the end when you are once again greeted with a hefty dose of lore told through more still images and text. For me, this is the way to do storytelling in this kind of game. I don't want to be stuck talking for minutes on end while traveling. I just want to get into the action. But when the story did come into play, I found it to be quite interesting, which I wasn't completely expecting, because apart from those times with heavy exposition, the game doesn't take itself seriously at all. Most interactions with other characters, including the bosses you fight, have some degree of humor to them. I think it mostly works here, though there were a few occasions where I wasn't in the mood for this type of humor and the jokes didn't land, but I think that mostly had to do with me and not the game. And really, it's those times in between sections of dialogue that matter the most. The DNA of Ninja Gaiden and Metroid are all over this game, and if you're anything like me, that's all you'll really need to know to determine whether or not you're interested in playing. But because this is a review, I think I should still go over the basics. For the first half or so of the game, you'll simply be jumping, dodging, and slashing your way through various enemies and levels while collecting time shards, which is this game's form of currency. As you progress, you'll gradually start learning and incorporating more techniques into your moveset, like the ability to glide, scale walls, and throw shurikens. One of the primary aspects of platforming in this game is something called cloud stepping, which is basically a double jump. However, in order to get that second jump, you have to hit either an enemy, projectile, or object while in midair. This might sound complicated, but it really isn't. That being said, there are times where the game will really test your skills with this technique, and you will die a lot. Fortunately, when it comes to dying, the game is pretty good with its checkpoint system. There were some sections that grated on my nerves with the number of times I had to play them, but usually if I bought whatever upgrades I could afford, I was able to figure it out within a few tries. And those sections were mostly the boss fights, which I found to be challenging in a satisfying way. You can't just brute force your way through the game. You have to learn the enemy attack patterns and use them to your advantage. In almost every case, the reason you fail will be your fault and not the game's. And once you reach a certain point, a really interesting thing happens. The game changes from a linear side-scroller to a Metroidvania. I can't think of any other game or series that does this, but this game actually pulls it off. Mostly. And it even makes sense within the world of the game. Once you reach this point, you're told you have to go back to the sections you've already completed and search for special items that are hidden in those sections. Only now, the sections you've already completed are not exactly the same as they were when you first visited them. That's because the game's second major game mechanic change, time hopping, comes into play. You see, all the areas you've previously gone through now have time gates strewn around them, and when you pass through those time gates, the entire level layout changes from 8-bit to 16-bit, or vice versa. This is similar to games like Guacamelee or Outland, where swapping between dimensions opens up previously blocked off sections of the map, allowing you to explore areas you couldn't get to before. This is a really cool mechanic, and it's one of the reasons the game is as good as it is. It's also one of the things that hides the fact that the Metroidvania aspects of this game are not quite as strong as the platforming aspects. For as fun as it is to go back to previous sections and find new paths to explore, there aren't a lot of incentives or rewards for going off the beaten path. The only collectibles in this game are green medallions that are hidden throughout the world. Finding all of them does unlock a special item, but it's nothing you can't live without. Don't get me wrong, I was never bored of revisiting previous areas to find new paths and honing my platforming skills, but it would have been nice if there was a little more incentive to traveling back through each area. Of course, I say that, but I also appreciate the lack of bloat in this game, so I guess I really don't know what I'd change if it were up to me. I guess I'd just classify this as a platformer with Metroidvania elements, and not really fault it for what I expect when I hear that term, versus what this game is actually trying to do. I've brought up the visual style multiple times, but I can't understate how good the art is in this game. A lot of so-called retro-style games have pixel art inspired by old games. The Messenger is one of those games that actually takes that inspiration to the next level. The attention to detail is insane. Nearly every asset in this game has both an 8-bit and a 16-bit version, from enemies to health items to the environment. There were many occasions where I would just go back and forth between the two styles just to see all the details and how they changed. It really is pretty amazing, especially if you're a fan of the classic style. And I can't really talk about the art without also talking about the music, because every time you switch between 8 and 16-bit versions, the music changes as well. Every piece of music and sound effect in the game has 2 versions. So not only does what you're looking at change when you go through a time gate, what you hear does as well. For someone like me who grew up with hearing this kind of music in games, it is incredible how much care went into the experience. For the trophy hunters, there isn't anything here that's egregious, but a few trophies will keep you on your toes, and you'll definitely need to polish your platforming skills to get the platinum. Many of the trophies will come naturally as you play, but there are a few trophies that are missable, so you'll want to skim through the list before you start. Overall, I'd say this list is on the easier side, apart from some of the challenges platforming brings. It's not a guarantee of quality, but whenever I see pixel art, especially if it's done well, there's a good chance I'm gonna like the game. Watching gameplay of The Messenger showed me that it nailed its visual aesthetic. Actually playing it showed me that it also nailed the platforming mechanics. And while it does lean into its side-scroller inspirations more than its Metroidvania inspirations, I still loved my time with the game. If you're a fan of Ninja Gaiden, Metroid, side-scrollers, or platformers in general, you owe it to yourself to give this game a shot. Like I said, when this style of game is done well, there is a very high chance that I'm going to like it. From Ninja Gaiden to Super Mario Bros. To Mega Man, my childhood was defined in part by these kinds of games. Even when they get insanely frustrating and require the utmost precision, the sense of satisfaction you get when you figure out their secrets makes it all worth it. The good news is that it seems like Sabotage Studio plans to continue making awesome games inspired by the old classics. Right now they're working on a prequel to The Messenger that will be a turn-based RPG inspired by games like Chrono Trigger. It's not due out until 2022, but you better believe I am excited for it. For now though, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. Like the video if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, play this game.